Radio in association with Griffiths Clothing and Zany and supporting the Jeff Astle Foundation. With me, the Gabby Cabby, and the Governor, Alan Hudson, for Part 3, the England Years, Alf, Don, and a 3-year ban. How you doing, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, mate, until you mentioned Don, but, he's gone now, so we're still here.
Yeah, and we're going to take a trip down memory lane because it's almost 50 years since your debut for Chelsea at the Dell against Southampton, 1st of February 1969. So we're going to be focusing today on the England years. 1970 was a pivotal year for Alan Hudson. The 69-70 season, you'd just broken into the team. Chelsea had got to the FA Cup final, all was looking great. And then on Easter Monday, you had an injury at the Hawthorns that put paid to your Wembley appearance and also prevented you from being the first teenager to represent England at the World Cup finals.
Yeah. Well, at that time, it never entered my mind, of course. You don't think about things like that, but I think there was so much going on in such a short space of time. At that time, I'd only been in the Chelsea team for 6 months, say. And I was just finding my feet in that team, and the closer we got to Wembley for the FA Cup, little did I know, it wasn't until we played QPR in the 6th round, I think, and we beat them, and Venables played and Marsh played, and they had half a decent team. It was a big local derby, and we knocked them out, and that was when Alf Ramsey came out with Osgood scored a hat-trick, which really clinched his place in the Mexico squad. And then Alf come out with that saying that there's no limit to what I could achieve, and that put me in the firing line for Mexico myself.
Because you were in that original 40, you would have gone. And many years later, one of your journalist friends said that when Bobby Charlton did come off in that game, it would have been you, not Colin Bell, that replaced him, because you were really primed, because Bobby was getting a little bit older, and it was you that was primed to take over from Bobby Charlton in that England shirt, wasn't it?
Well, I think Alf would have looked at it in a way that I was young, fit. Had I not had the injury at West Brom, I'd have still been very fit. I was getting stronger. I was the more games I played, the better I was playing. And I think he probably see me as having the young legs and being clever enough to play in that role, and just say to me, you make sure, I couldn't do what Bobby Charlton could do as regards going forwards and shooting and things like that, but he wouldn't have wanted me to do that. It would just have been a matter of going and sitting in there with Alan Ball and trying to keep the ball with 2-0 up and stopping Beckenbauer from doing what he actually did in the end, and that was to crucify us.
Yeah, again, many people says that they took off Bobby to rest him for the semi-finals, but when you look at it and you hear and you read press cuttings, it wasn't that. Bobby was tiring, and Alf just wanted to freshen it up, didn't he?
Well, he did. I think that is a question that would never be answered. Yeah. Only Alf would ever, he took that to his grave with him, whatever he was thinking. I think it was bad management. Myself, because if you're 2-0 up in any game and you're controlling the game, which we were, I think we were actually playing better in 70 than what we did in 66. And we proved that against Brazil as well in in that match. But we were controlling the Germans. We had everything under control. And there's one thing you don't do is when you're controlling the game is change things. And that would have meant, even if I would have been on the line, he brought me on, it would have been a wrong decision. I'd have just kept Bobby on there, because even the Germans admitted that they couldn't believe that he brought Charlton off, because as they said in the 66 final, Bobby and Beckenbauer cancelled themselves out of the game, and they did the same in 70. and it was just so happens that we mastered them really. It was the best we played in them 2 World Cups, I think. Apart from the Brazil game, which I think we were outstanding. I think it was probably Bobby Moore's greatest game ever. But no, I think Alf made a massive mistake changing the team at that stage.
And again, what confidence it does give the Germans when you do see your opposition's best player going off. It almost gives them a little bit of an adrenaline boost, doesn't it? And I hear what you're saying. It's almost like when you're picking your team, if your best players aren't playing, then your opposition looks around and thinks, happy days here, we've got half a chance. Whereas if your big players are on the pitch, it's psychologically game on, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think if you look at if you look at boot on the other foot, the Germans were 2-0 up and they took Beckenbauer off and say Muller or Seeler off, we'd have felt more comfortable defensively, and we'd have thought we can go on and we got half a chance here. Whereas if they just keep them on the field, I remember years and years ago. Well, not that too long after I played in a game at Chelsea, and we played at Stoke in the League Cup. It was a Wednesday night, and Osgood had a fight, a big bust up with Sexton in the dressing room at half time, and he pulled him off. And Stoke were 1-0 up at the time, and we come out at half time, and you could see Stoke looking round at each other, wondering where Osgood was, and they knew that. They had one less problem, and Ozzy was our, he was our main man. He was our goal machine, and by Sexton pulling him off, he gave Stoke, as you just said, so much more confidence to go on and win the game.
Now, your international career consisted of 2 games, unbelievably 2 games. We're going to get onto that. But your under-23 career, that was, you played 9 games, didn't you, for the under-23s? Talk me through your first game.
I have no idea. I haven't got a clue. I know my first game my first game was my other worst ground, which was Roker Park. Yeah. That was the only time I ever got sent off in one of my last games for Stoke. But that got postponed. That got abandoned through snow. I don't know with how long to go, but it wasn't much of a game because of the snow itself. It's part of the game. I remember that being my first game. I remember a game at Hampden Park, which was with about 20 odd thousand, and it sounded like there was about 200,000 in there. It was amazing. I didn't really play that well. And I remember a couple of games against Wales. One when I came back from a bad injury and had a outstanding game down in Wrexham. And that was a game when Alf said to me after the match, I think you better preserve yourself. You're doing a little bit too much hard work, which I found a little bit... I couldn't believe his words, actually. Yeah. I can understand him saying about players not working hard enough, but I don't think a player can work too hard. But I was just, I used that match as a kind of a comeback and as a fitness test for me, really. And I had a really good game on a really heavy pitch, which I used to like playing on heavy pitches because of my bad ankle.
Now, your 3-year ban, that was towards the end of, was it the 71-72 season? You were still at Chelsea, obviously.
Yeah.
And it must have been before the 1972 game against Northern Ireland. So can you throw a little bit more light on that? Because Bobby Moore had told you that you were going to make your full international debut for England against Northern Ireland, a game that your old adversary Terry Neal scored the winning goal.
That was my first. I think that was my first full international squad.
Yeah.
And Bobby just took me under his wing, and Bobby, I don't know what it was. I think he might see a little bit of Georgie in me. uh, and I don't know. He just took a liking to me, and he, as a kid, and he took me under his wing, and he came up to me before training. He just put his arm around me and we was walking across, and I felt quite privileged. And all of a sudden he said, "Well done." He said, "You're playing tonight." And Bobby himself wasn't playing, funny enough, and he said, "Congratulations." And you just go and he gave me a bit of advice about how to play, just play as you do at your club level, blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden we had a little bit of a warm up, and then Alf called us in, and then he read the team out, and my name wasn't mentioned. And I looked at Bobby, and he looked at me, and he was so embarrassed. And he apologised to me after, and I said, "Bobby, please don't apologise to me." I said, "You was trying to help me," and he must have changed his mind as he was looking around at the squad. I don't know, right? I don't know what happened, but why tell Bobby in the first place I was going to play? I don't know. It's another one of our mysteries,
Did your band come after that episode out or before
Yes.
it? Yeah, it did.
Yes,
okay,
it
so
did.
that there was all these little things that were leading up to, and obviously, as you'd alluded to earlier, the heavier pitches suited you because of that injury that you picked up at the Hawthorns, and injuries
Yes.
dogged your career. And I mean, even so, many years later, in 1975, Tony Waddington got the Fire Brigade out so you could play again on an Easter Monday because you needed those heavy pitches. That's where you thrived.
Well, yeah. I mean, I had a chronic. People don't really know. Not even the doctors knew at that time. And I was going outside the club and seeing. I went to see so many different doctors and faith healers and this, that, and the other, trying to find out. I even went to see a fella called Tucker. And he used to look after all the big boxers, and through the fella called Tony Mancini, who was a boxing family, he put my father onto him, and we went to see him. And strangely enough, I went to Bermuda some years later, and he was a part of. There's a place in Bermuda called Tuckertown, and he was one of that family. But he was a top man in his field, and not even he could do anything with this injury of mine. I could write we could do an old program on the people I see and how many different kind of treatments I had on it, but it was never going to get better. And therefore, it made it near impossible for me to play on hard grounds or anything like that. I just needed the rain, and the greatest thing that ever happened was probably my two most famous games were on the heaviest pitches. One was when it rained for 2 days before the West Germany game, and the other is when, as you say, Tony, got the Fire Brigade out before the Liverpool game, which was a big match over Easter. It was a third of 3 matches over them 4 days we used to play in. We played Friday and Saturday in London, West Ham and Arsenal, and then we went back to play Liverpool, the European champions at that time, and I was absolutely gutted. I said to Tony, Governor, I think I'll be missing Monday. It's top of the table clash as well. And he just said to me, "No, you won't." He said, "You won't." He said, "Because I've heard the weather forecast." He said, "I've heard it's going to rain." And he made it all up, knowing in his mind that he would get the Fire Brigade in, which was another master stroke by him.
But again, that's what it's all about. Managing the person, managing the player, and managing the injury. And that's something that Ramsey didn't do, because he phoned you up at Stamford Bridge and he pretty much ordered you to go to that under-23 tournament whilst you were nursing an injury. And because you didn't, he then banned you and Colin Todd. Malcolm McDonald come with the old back injury and he got away with it, but
Malcolm was the smartest one of the three of us because he knew they couldn't detect a back injury. But that's what happens when you're honest. You see, if you're honest, you get nowhere in the game. And all I done was being completely honest with him. But it was just the way he done it. I think football's no different from any other walk of life. I was just told to be at Stamford Bridge one day about 2:00 to expect a call from Ramsey. He was calling me from about a mile away. When he could have asked to meet me somewhere and sat down, had a cup of tea with me or a cup of coffee or something, or even a glass of wine, and said, "What's your problem?"
Yep.
And we could have talked it through. I mean, that's what Waddington would have done. He would have said, he would have called me in his office, or he'd have took me out to lunch and said, what's the problem or my phone was out. He would have asked me, communication is everything. And Alf was just so, he was like a school teacher talking to a child, really. And it was, if you're not at Heathrow there tomorrow, you'll just I'll never forget the words. If you're not at Heathrow tomorrow, you'll just take the consequences. And I can remember coming off the phone to him. I can remember walking back down to Christine Matthews' office in the Chelsea office itself. It was pretty. It was like walking through death row, really. And it didn't really hit me until I got to her, and she said, "What did he say?" I said, "He hasn't really told me anything. He just said I got to take the consequences." And Christine, being her, she said, "Well, you are a silly boy. You should go." I said, "Look, Christine, you don't understand. Nobody understands. You get an injury like this, you just don't go and play them for anybody with a bad injury. And I need the rest." And I did need the rest. I'd had a long, hard season. And I was thinking of trying to rest it and thinking about the following season. And the England under-23s at that time with the father thing, if it had been a full international, I just wouldn't have been able to play. So, it was just the way he treated me. He treated me like I was a kid, and there he was just 3 months earlier saying there's no limit to what you can achieve. And if you looked at any other country in the world, it would have been like, if I'm 18, 19, it would have been like Holland, kicking Cruyff out, for banning him for 3 years, or in Argentina as a kid, Messi or Maradona, you say you're banned for 3 years. Colin Todd was probably our best young defender, the replacement of Bobby Moore at that time. It was the perfect replacement, and there he is banning our best young defender as well. So, and then they wondered why we didn't qualify for the World Cup for the next 10 years or 12 years, and that's where it all began. I'm not saying it was us too, but you do not ban your best young players. I mean, look at what's happened since in the World Cup. We're crying out for young players to come through and break through, and you encourage these young players to come through. You don't treat them like they're juvenile delinquents or they're doing something really wrong. I did absolutely nothing wrong, and looking back just 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm thinking how the game has changed. You got Rio Ferdinand failing a drugs test or not taking his drug test, and he gets 9 months. And I thought, Christ, what's going on here? Only because it was Ferguson who behind it all. And I thought, it was just Ramsey. I think because he won the World Cup, he kind of put himself up on a pedestal to actually do anything he wanted to do, and it was wrong. I should have been brought in front of a committee of some sort and asked questions of why I didn't want to go on this tour, which was a friendly tour. It wasn't even like they do today, a World Cup, under-21 World Cup. It was just a friendly under-23 tour, and my ankle just wouldn't have took it.
We're just interrupting you a little bit here. Gary Tibble says, great to hear Alan Hudson. He also said Alan should have played more for England. I think everybody agrees with that. And Mossy says, hi guys. Great listening to Alan Hudson as always. Now, Bobby Moore, let's talk briefly about Bobby. My opinion is with great captains, they almost win you things rather than the managers, because they're the ones on the pitch. And the way I looked at 1966, had Bobby Moore not have played for England, we probably wouldn't have won it. We did have, yes, some world-class players. And then when Alf's time is running out, I think the ideal, looking back, and it's great to have a crystal ball, but I think having Bobby Moore managing the England team and having some input in the England team would have been instrumental to the development of the younger, more maverick players that the establishment overlooked for a generation almost.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think as young players look up to people like Bobby. It was Bobby, but Bobby was more than just a great player. The likes of Bobby Charlton. You can't say the same thing of, because Bobby was a different character at all. But Bobby Moore was more like a Franz Beckenbauer in Germany. The way he handled himself. He took over the team there. Johan Cruyff taking over the Dutch team. I'm not saying Bobby Moore would have been a great England manager, but put him some kind of position and bring. I think he would have been a great England manager if with someone like Don Howe as a coach under him.
Yep.
Bobby knew the best players in the country, and Don would have straightened them out. I'm not a lover of coaches, but Don is the only one I can actually say I've ever played under that did anything worthwhile in training. But he never told you what to do. He just organised your defence, and yes, I agree. I mean, and nobody's ever mentioned that Bobby Moore. I mean, the way Bobby was treated by the FA was shabby anyway. It was terrible, and I think the same goes for West Ham. The way they treated him was awful. To let him leave and go to Fulham like he did after giving such service to them. I mean, they got to 3 finals in 3. He I think he probably the only man got to 3 finals in 3 years. By winning the FA Cup with West Ham. Then they won the Cup Winners' Cup the year after with West Ham at Wembley, and then the following year I think they won the World Cup.
Yep.
So he's gone up them steps 3 times in 3 years, and now you can't get no greater experience than that, and doing it for West Ham as well. And West Ham treated him as if he was just another player at the end of the day. And then you got the likes of Trevor Brooking, who gets a job with the FA. Yeah. Now, that doesn't add up.
But as a person as well, what was Bobby like? Because, he set you guys under the wings, and not only, on the training field, but down to the pubs. And Bobby was part of the scene, wasn't he?
You go if you can imagine knowing Bobby, and he's won the World Cup, he's done everything in the game there is to be done. Yeah. He's revered by everyone, and if he walked in the pub and you're in the pub, he was just another one of the lads. But he was always immaculate. He was always immaculately dressed. And he was always one of the lads. He was never put himself above anybody. He was modest as anything, and he was always there for advice for anyone. And for me, he was terrific, right to the end. Even before he died. The last time I see him was at a Phil Collins concert, and me and Phil had a drink together.
When I'm feeling blue, take a look at you, then I'm not so blue. When you're close to me, I can feel your heartbeat, I can hear you breathing in my ear.
Collins just couldn't take his eyes off him. It was like he was talking to some kind of god. But he was just the most wonderful, wonderful man. My man was Waddington, but he was a manager. But he was the most wonderful man as a footballer that I ever met.
You were having the time of your life at Stoke. You were in the 2 PFA Team of the Year in 74, 75, 76 season. And it was in the 1975 season, in the March, that you had the call in from Don. And that was largely due to the press and due to Tony Waddington saying that Alan Hudson will play for a World 11 before he plays for England the way he's going.
Well, he did that. I was in a couple of squads before that West Germany game, in which he could have picked me.
Yeah.
And one was, I remember one was Yugoslavia's. I didn't even get on the bench, and I knew he wasn't going to pick me. And then all of a sudden, I thought to myself, "Hang on, we got Germany coming up in a few weeks' time. That could be the game he's going to pick me because he thinks I'm not going to be able to cope with it, And me and Bawley spoke about this, and he caught me and Bawley out once or twice when we wouldn't play bingo and carpet bowls on one particular day. And we've been out along the street having a few drinks, and we weren't allowed to drink. And he warned us about it. And that was the game before the Germans, and he made Alan Ball captain for the Germany game, and he picked me. And me and Bawley looked at each other, and we smiled as much as to say, "This is our chance." And I mean, Alan Ball already won the World Cup as a kid, so he had much more experience than Don Revie about how to win. International matches, and it was just great. And that photo of me and Bawley coming off the field just about painted the picture, didn't it? Really, it was great. But yeah, the reason I did get picked in the end was because of Tony banging the drum for me. I played a game at Tottenham. Stoke beat them 2-0. I scored. I played outstanding that game, and it was the first time Stoke had won there in 100 years, and I'll never forget all the Fleet Street gang were outside, and Tony was talking to them, and then I see that quote on the Monday saying that that I played for how well have I actually got to play to get in the England team. I will play for the World 11 before. He was having a knock at Don in the nicest possible way, because he wasn't the kind of man to point the finger at anyone, but he was just stating a fact. What the hell did I have to do to get a game?
Because White Hart Lane was your favourite ground, wasn't it? Your dad used to take you there to watch the great Tottenham team, and also used to take you to Arsenal to watch the wonderful George Eastham as well.
Well, Chelsea's supporters may hate me for saying this, but White Hart Lane was my favourite ground outside of the Victoria ground when I played there for that period of time. But White Hart Lane would always be outstanding. Yeah, my dad would take me there, me and my brother, because that was when they had the first ever double winning team. They had the best football team. We all have Jimmy Greaves. John White played inside right. He always took me to see great inside forwards. The great Dave Mackay. I mean, Blanchflower. That was a one, and it was always packed out. And my dad would finish work. He worked for himself anyway. He was just a window cleaner, and he got off work this day, and he said, "Come on, we'll go to Tottenham." And then, whenever Arsenal were home on a Wednesday night, he would take us over to see George Eastham, and that was a story that really was an incredible story, because he didn't really used to say George Eastham the best player I've ever seen, but he used to say, "Watch this fella play," and lo and behold, there was George. I was standing next to George when he scored the winner against me in the final. In the 72 League Cup final with Stoke, which I got on my wall. I'm standing next to him as he's scoring it, and and strangely enough, Tony see enough, I think, of me to think that I would be the one to replace him. And it was. I remember my first game for Liverpool against Liverpool and pulling George's shirt on, and knew I had to do something because he was such a hero in Stoke, and I couldn't rubbish his shirt, kind of thing. And luckily enough, it all worked out.
Because one of your other heroes, the great Johnny Haynes, in 1950, Johnny would have been the first teenager to represent England at the World Cups, but in that squad of 22, England only took 17, and Johnny was one of those that was left behind on a reserve list. Now, going back to the 70s and Don Revie, he even used to have the taxi drivers on tap, didn't he?
We talking about missing the bingo and the carpet bowls, but I think it was a Yugoslavia game, and Bally was on the bench. I weren't in the squad. I was in the squad, but I was one of those that was left out of it altogether. So, and Bally said to me, "You fancy going out for a drink?" And I said, "Well, can't go out." I said, "You're on the bench tomorrow." So he says, "Don't worry about that." He says, "I'm not bothered about it." He said he won't bring me on anyway. So we went out this night, and we ran to the nearest pub because it was raining. We jumped in a cab, and I'll never forget Alan Ball. Give him £100, and he said, "You're that." He said, "That's apart from the fare." He says, "You're going to take us all around London tonight, wherever we want to go. You're going to wait for us and bring us back here in the morning. Whenever we get back," which was 5 o'clock in the morning. And he took us to the White Hart, which was the Arsenal pub of that time. Then we went into the West End of London. We went to a nightclub or to another nightclub, and we got back at 5 o'clock in the morning. And we trained that morning and heard no more of it, and turned up for the following international, and Revie called us in, and he said, "I had reason to believe that you two were out till 5 in the morning, blah blah." To cut it short, he said, "Is it true?" And I was going to say yes, yeah, but I wouldn't say it because I didn't want to put Alan in it, because of his what he had done for his country. I mean, if it had come out in the press that Bally had done that, they would have trashed his name, and that would have been unfair. And then Alan Ball just turned around and said, "No, it's not true. That wasn't us." And as we walked out the room, Bally just turned around and he said to him, "Oh, by the way," he said, where did you get this information from?" And he said, "Oh, a certain cab driver." So it didn't matter where you went or what you'd done. Everybody in the hotel, he would pay everybody off to, and he did the same at Ellen Road. He had his spies everywhere, and obviously that's why he had Les Cocker as well. It was like playing for the mafia, really. It was it wasn't a nice thing. You had to be looking over your shoulder all the time.
But that debut that you gave against the West Germans, who were current world champions as well, with Alan Ball, both of you in centre midfield, Alan as the captain, you as his general, arguably one of the greatest debuts ever at Wembley, and certainly for an England player.
Yeah, it was. The game started a bit slowly. I remember I was very fortunate in that game because the two fullbacks were making their debut as well. A kid called Ian Gillard at QPR and Steve Whitworth at Leicester, who I didn't really know. But I remember saying them before the game. They looked very, very nervous. And where I wasn't, I was full of beans because I was playing so well from the club. And I said, "Look, don't be nervous. Just get on with your defensive game. But every time you get the ball, just give it to me or give it to Bally, whoever's closest to you. Just give it to us, and then don't worry about it. We just keep the ball." And that's how I had so much of the ball, because I got the ball so much off them, and then started to play from there. And then me and Bally would, and Colin Bell did a great job in midfield. He's a different kind of player from us. He was an up and down player. and it was. I found it so easy against the Germans because playing with someone like Alan Ball, it was like playing. You just like playing, knocking the ball up against a brick wall. You knock it up against a brick wall, and it comes straight back to you. It was brilliant to play with, and of course we had Shannon up front, who was a good player. Keegan was a good player at that time, and of course Malcolm was up front. I mean, it was quite new for Malcolm international football, but with Shannon and Keegan were good to have up front that night as well. So that really that team was not a bad team.
Yeah.
And yet, you think if you beat the Germans 2-0 with that team, you think, oh yeah, if we can build on this. And instead of that, he just because of our personalities, we kicked Wally out, he kicked me out, and he kicked Malcolm out, and done it again, and we failed to get to the World Cup when he had the basis of a good team.
And he had some other great players waiting in the wings. The likes of Rodney Marsh was still about, Stan Bowles was about, Frank Worthington was about. We got Tony Curry coming on the scene. We had got so many flair players. I mean, if we just had one or two of those flair players in midfield to take to this World Cup, we could make, I think, big inroads, because I think England haven't got a bad defence at the moment. I think inside forwards and with Harry Kane, we've got a decent group of players that can score goals. But the one missing ingredient is that creativity, that centre midfield, and that's what Revie missed in the 1970s as well. Hudson, Ball, and Curry, and I was Colin Bell as well, because Nijinsky, he'd run up and down all day, wouldn't he? He'd run through walls. We had the players, but he just didn't play them, and that's why we didn't qualify.
Well, I've always said it, and people ask me all the time, what's wrong with England management, and our best manager since we won the World Cup was obviously Venables. In '96, because he picked his best players. Yeah. Football is very, very simple. Football management is very simple. All you do is pick the best players available, and that's what Revie didn't do. He left the best players out. He just picked the players that would do what he told them to do. Yeah. And as you say, every great international team got to have great midfield players, and we couldn't cope in the last World Cup and the time when with the Italians against people like Pirlo, we couldn't stop him, and he was an old man at the time. I think since the 60s and 70s we've had probably the second best captain of all time has been Brian Robson. I think he probably one of the great internationals of all time. He was a midfield player. And then you had Glenn Hoddle, who played his first game against me for Tottenham, and without doubt, then there was Gascoigne. So they were the three really outstanding players, but we never really built upon that. They wasn't really given a role to apart from Brian Robson, who just got on with the game and played fantastically well for club and country. I don't think they were really given. I suppose not even Gascoigne was told. You couldn't tell Gascoigne how to play because he was a genius in his own right. But and then you had Hoddle. But when you think we've only had three real outstanding players in 50 years. Yep. When we've had really, really a lot more. I mean, I played at Chelsea with a couple of kids who could have played in the England team, and they couldn't even get in the Chelsea team. A kid called Mickey Fillery at Chelsea, his ability was incredible, and Dow Jasper, but they couldn't even get a game in the first team because the game had changed by then. I'd been to Seattle and come back, and I thought, what's gone on? It was a Charles Hughes, it was a Route 1 football, and let's get the ball forward. And that game has suffered ever since. And I don't know what's going to happen. That it's going to be the same this time around.
If there was, cause we'll just delve a little bit on today, because I want to go back to 75, because I want to talk about the Cyprus game as well, and then the return game in Limassol that you and Borley and wasn't even in the squad going back, which I think the whole of the British press was absolutely amazed. If there was a player from yesteryear that you could put into this squad and into the current team to play the first game against Tunisia, what player would it be, Al? I'm kind of like erring on the side of a midfield player, because I just think that's the one missing ingredient for England going into this World Cup.
Well, I truly believe the one player I've always admired most is Alan Ball, and you know, we miss it. It's not just he was a great footballer; it was just his enthusiasm, his everything. He had everything as a footballer. People would argue that he couldn't beat people and things like that, but he didn't need to beat people because he could do it with a pass, or he was a great one-touch player. You know, and people like him are great players because they make other players play, and you could put young players alongside Alan Ball, and Alan Ball would, you know, he would see them through matches. And a lot of players and midfield players that play for us, half the time they don't know what they're doing. You know, if you go back to the likes of when Graham Taylor was in charge and he was picking people like Colton Palmer. I don't like digging individuals out, but you know, this is international football.
Yep.
And you know, we're looking for world-class players, and I was very annoyed with Harry Kane the other day, saying I think we could. I'm a big fan of Harry Kane, and him saying that we can win the World Cup. I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. What is wrong with English players? Why don't we just do our talking with our feet and our heads? You know, but we're doing it again. But yes, I think. I think Ball would have been. Ball's been the most outstanding midfield player we've had. I think he showed it in '66. He showed it in '70, and then 5 years later against the Germans, he did it again. And it sickened Revie because Revie made him captain, thinking that he was going to fail, and he didn't. It was, you know. He was captain that night, and Beckenbauer was captain for them, and there they were, like 9 years on from '66. Still in the national teams, but Beckenbauer was looked at as God in Germany, and there was Alan Ball being, you know, picked for all the wrong reasons, just as I was. You know, Revie thought, well, I'll play these two because they don't play bingo and carpet bowls. They won't get away with this tonight, and we proved him wrong, and we partied all through the night on the strength of that.
But again, and you did, and you got Derby County away on the following Saturday, hadn't you?
Yeah, that was quite amazing how I actually made the game, let alone played like I played. But again, it was the management of Waddington. You know, I knew I owed so much to him, not only for my form for Stoke, but for getting me in the England team. And what happens is when you play in a game like that on a Wednesday, and you go into a game on a Saturday, it doesn't matter how tired you are and if you've been out all night or whatever. Although I didn't go out on that Friday night, I mean, I was absolutely exhausted, and I just got through it on sheer adrenaline, really, and didn't want to let my boss down, and that's how it works. And when you think, I mean, if anybody's got YouTube, watch it on YouTube. You watch that pitch. You know, some of these horses at Cheltenham, you know, they'd have to be pulled out. You know, it was just an incredible pitch, and yet, you know, put in a great performance. We beat them 2-1, and we should have went on and won the league. Instead, Derby won it because we had, I think, in the last 10 games we had 3 broken legs in our Stoke team. So you know, again, as our story goes, Paul, and as we spoke so many times. Just when it looks like it's our turn, something crops up, and we didn't deserve to lose the league that way, and especially having broken legs,
But again, another player that you teamed up with, Stoke, Jimmy Greenough, another player that was overlooked by Don Revie. But again, it was a bit personal with Jimmy and you, because wasn't there a situation with Revie that he'd sent you home from a gathering?
No, it was we were both chosen to play as overage players in an under-23 game in Hungary. I think it was all planned. It was a setup. And it just so happened that we were playing well for Stoke together. And what a lot of Stoke supporters don't understand, Jimmy and I, we wasn't great friends at that. We are now, but we wasn't then. But the way we played on the field, you thought we must have slept together. I mean, we were just incredible. It was just incredible. And we got picked to go to Hungary, and we went to Hungary. And I remember saying to Jimmy, I said, I don't fancy lunch today. I said, because I used to watch my weight a lot, and he used to have a bit of a weight problem. And we said, we'll just skip lunch. And it was in Hungary. It was snowing. There was thick snow on the floor. It was horrible. It was freezing cold out. So I can remember we had a load of papers and magazines or whatever. And we're laying in bed this lunchtime. We had trained, and then the phone rang, and it was Cocker, and he said, "What do you think you're doing, you two?" So well, no, we're just sitting there reading magazines and that. And he said he's going mad. So we said, "What's he going mad about?" He said, "Because you're supposed to be having lunch." He said, "Oh, we didn't know we had to eat when he says we had to eat." He said, "You better be down here straight away." So we jumped in the lift, we got down, and he was just standing there, like Marlon Brando. And it was the Don, and it wasn't worth saying anything to him, because he didn't listen to you, and he just said, who the hell do you two think you are? And he knew Jimmy, because he had Jimmy at Leeds, and he sold him to Birmingham. He didn't like Jimmy because it was obvious. I spoke to Jimmy about this, and I said, the reason he got rid of you, Jimmy, is because you wouldn't leave your foot in when people like Clark and Jones and everybody else did. He wouldn't go over the top to people, and that was why I didn't like Jimmy. And Jimmy was too good a footballer anyway. And that was it. And we were never, I just wish that one of my greatest regrets is that I would have just retired after the West Germany game and not played against Cyprus, and then maybe then press people might turn around and ask a few questions why. The FA might have said, "What's all this about?" And I'd have just said, "Look, well, I just can't play. I just can't play for this man that don't want me to play for him. I want to play for somebody who wants me to play for him for the right reasons." And because it was no fun turning up, and go back to any walk of life again. It's no fun going to work if you can't get on with your boss,
And that Cyprus game that you did play in, Supermax scored 5 goals, and one Alan Hudson after walking off the pitch, because it was on the big electronic scoreboard at Wembley. Supermax 5, Cyprus 0. Read that and weep, you bastard. Read that and weep.
that was Malcolm's version. But he couldn't do no more than do that, could he? I mean, and to not pick him after that was just
mad.
It was just, how can you justify it? I mean, if you're the FA, you've got to say, "Excuse me, didn't you watch the last match? He scored 5 goals." If Gerd Muller had done it for Germany and got dropped the next game, I think there would be a public outcry, wouldn't there? What is all that about? What more can you do than score 5 goals? I mean, Malcolm. I played with Malcolm at Arsenal for over a year, 18 months, and and to watch him in training and watch him stay out after training and just keep shooting at goal, and he was just incredible. He just lived for hitting the target, as they call it today. And that's what he did. He did his job. He scored 5 goals and never got seen again. And it's just unthinkable.
Because Malcolm and yourself, you're of a similar age. I think you're both 51 births, aren't you? And Malcolm started off at Fulham, didn't he? I think he was a fullback, wasn't he, before he went to Luton?
Yeah, he played left back at Fulham. And then they moved him up front. I think he was fortunate enough to play with Johnny Haynes, and Johnny Haynes didn't like him because he wouldn't pass the ball to him. Malcolm kept shooting from about 50 yards. But yeah, that's where he started, and as luck would have it, he had a bit of a charm life, Malcolm, but he was one of those that there's not many players you come across through your life who have such great self-belief in their ability.
Yeah. And
he had such great belief. He wasn't the most skillful player. He wasn't a player that you could knock the ball into and get back, not like a Greenough or an Osgood. But you knock the ball in the right space for him, and every time he shot, either the goalkeeper will make a save. It's very, very rarely, a go in the crowd. And that was because he trained so hard at that. I mean, I can understand why people like Beckham got on with his free kicks, and everything else over these walls and curling balls over the wall. Well, Malcolm was the same with his shooting. Only he wouldn't shoot at the wall. If he shoot at the wall, we'd break it in half anyway.
Anne Fitzgerald says, "Hi Alan, nice to hear you again." Sean Caden, awesome to hear Hoodie back on air. Also top player, as Jimmy was. Super Mac had a big mouth and that was his problem, but a great left peg. I don't think we could disagree with any of those comments. Talk to me about that wonderful time that you spent. Was it in France with Bob Latchford? That was a wonderful story.
Yeah, it was a fun story because it was again, it was something that out of the blue, because that was the game. That was funnily enough, strangely enough, an under 23 too. They just got rid of my band. I think they cut my band short because Ramsey had got the sack, and they were looking for a new manager, and a fella called Ken Furphy took over just as an interim. And we got to the airport, and we was at the airport this particular day, and I'd never thought too much of it. Just went for the trip really, because I was back. It was good just to be there and there be no Don Revie. And I thought, I might have a chance to build my career up again here. And he called us all in, Furphy, and he said, look, he says, I'm new at this game. I managed Watford. He said, internationally. He said, I haven't got a clue to make captain. He says, so could we have a show of hands, who do you, and the fella called Willie Madron, who was a big lad at centre half at Middlesbrough. I didn't know him. But he turned out a right nice lad, and it must have been his first trip as well, because he just turned around and he said, I don't think there's any question about this. He said, and he just pointed at me and he said, well, he's the best player in here. He said, surely he should be captain, and Furphy just turned around and said, anyone got any quibbles with it? And everyone kind of, it wasn't as if they wanted me to be captain. They just wanted to get on with it. But Willie spoke up anyway, made me captain, and then we got to our first departure place was I think it was Paris or something, and I'm with Bob Latchford, and Bob, who was a lovely fella, and he was a big strong boy, and his case didn't turn up. We got to the hotel, and he said, I've got no gear. And I said, try some of mine on. And he said, yours won't. He said, yours won't fit me. And he took his top off, his muscles like, you know. So I went, all right. I said, stay as you are. And my first job was to go in to see the secretary. So I went downstairs, and this is something I really look forward to for once, banging on their door instead of them banging on mine. And I just said to the fella, he said, what is it? And I said, my roommate hasn't got any gear. His case never turned up, and I want some money for him. So he says, well, what do you want? I said, well, give him 400 quid for go and buy some clothes. I said, he can't walk around and saying clothes for 5-6 days. And anyway, he went into his wallet and he gave me his money. I went up and gave it to Bob. I said, come on, we're going shopping. Let's get you some gear, and then we go and have a beer. And we walked round the corner, and he stopped along the street, and he was looking in his dress shop. And I started laughing to myself. And I said, what are you doing? And he says, I said, you're not a cross-dresser, are you? So he said, no. He says, everywhere I go in the world, whenever I go on tour, I always buy my wife a dress. I said, but you haven't got no clothes, Bob. Buy yourself some clothes first and then buy yourself something later. He said, no, I must buy her something. So he bought his wife a dress, and then we had to go and get him some clothes. But it was just absolutely hilarious. And now I've got a room with him for 5 days, and I thought, he's going to be starting dressing up as a woman, this fella, you know. And he was one of the toughest centre forwards in the country at that time, you know. So it was a great start to the trip, and it was all fun, really. Nothing come of it. I can't remember any of the matches. I think we played in Turkey, in Ankara, where we got flooded off. But it was no good, and the games weren't no good, and I don't think too much come out of it. I don't even know if I ever got picked again. I'm not too sure.
But again, what a difference it makes to be away, having a smile on your face, playing football like that, no pressure, no gaffer looking at you, got in taxi drivers on tap, got all the people out like Les Cocker and all his boys, and well, not many girls in them days, but all the boys looking in all the bars. Where's all the England players? Treat them like men, and you'll see them perform like men and world champions.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. I can remember being as captain but I didn't regard myself as captain. Yeah. I was just there, and all I wanted to do was, anyone with less experience than me was, if they had a problem, was to try and help them. And I remember coming in one night, we'd been out, and I walked through the hotel, and I looked in the hotel bar, and I remember Brian Greenough was sitting there with a fellow called Kevin Beattie, who was who would have been one of our greatest all-time players had he not got injured. He was an incredible player, and they were so drunk, it was unbelievable. And I walked in, I said, what do you think you're doing? You know, and they looked at me and I just say, don't think, you're captain, you're going to stop us doing this, you know. And they had gone, they said, we're trying to drink all the top shelf. We've started on the left and we're going right to the right. We're going to drink every drink there is up there, and that was what it was like, you know. And I said, good boys, well done, you know. I hope you succeed. And it just made me laugh. But that was the way it was, you know. It wasn't the right thing to do, but it just goes to show that was the way England was run around that time. And it was kind of it was like a Carry On England, you know. It was like might have had Sid James as manager or something, you know. It was a total joke, really. And how they come to pick me as captain, you know, asking the rest of the lads who should be captain, was really ridiculous, really. It should have been worked out. It was so unprofessional. They should have brought somebody in who had been manager before and said, look, just take over the trip, you know. And To think I got banned for not going on one under-23 trip, and then they have another under-23 trip, which is a shambles, just about sums it all up.
Well, also, we got to talk about the get-together. There was a big gathering, wasn't there, of the top 80 England players. Was that Don Revie that called it? And Peter Osgood wasn't picked, because you always call your mate the 81st best player in England.
Well, that was funny. I'll never forget it. It was he picked 80 players for a gathering at Manchester. And we had to go after the game on a Saturday, and I remember Jeff Salmons, who was in our team. Me and him went from Stoke, and we went in. We drove up to Manchester together. We stopped at every pub along the way. After that, we beat. I'm not sure who we beat on the Saturday. We had a good win on the home game. So we were driving along the A34, stopping at every pub and having a drink, and then we got there. And there was about 6 Chelsea players, 4 or 6. I mean, Chris Garland was there, Bill Garner. There was players there that I didn't even recognise, but there was no Osgood. Of course, Revie, because he scored against Leeds in the final and everything else, and there was 80 players there and no Peter Osgood. And I remember when I come down to London. The next time we went out and we was in a bar, and these people come in and they asked for autographs, and I said, "Can I introduce you to the 81st best player in the country?" And Osgood looked at me, and I thought he was going, because he did like an argument, Aussie. He said, "Don't you ever say that again in front of people." I said, "But you are, Oz. You didn't make the 80. So, but that's the way it was in them days.
And what was the time like? I'm guessing, Revie would have had you playing carpet bowls and bingo, but, if there was the likes of Borley and you and Summerby and 1 or 2 others, you'd have been down Slack Alice's, wouldn't you, if it was in Manchester?
Well, I always look at it and think, can you imagine, this, or any World Cup, the Germans playing bingo, or that 1970 Brazilian team playing bingo the day before they played us or something, and all, and we walk into a room and they're all seeing Pele and Tostao and Jorginho sitting there playing bingo. It is so ridiculous, too ridiculous for words. But that's what they say they did at Leeds United, and it was good for the team spirit. It kept them together. So it must have been something to do with numbers. Who they had to kick or someone. Mention number 10, and you kick him on Saturday or something. Because bingo and carpet bowls just didn't make any sense to any of us, and but the boys got on with it, and they all did as they were told. But me, Alan Ball, and Frank Worthington, we had other ideas, and we went for a walk down the Millionaires Row and pop in to see a couple of friends. I think one of them was Bernie Winters. We went in his house, and we were standing at his bar, and we was having a drink, we was having a laugh with him, because Alan knew him pretty well, and the first time I met him, I liked him. He was a nice man, and he said, "What are you three doing down here?" So we said, "Well, the others are busy." He said, "Oh, are they out playing golf?" I said, "No, Bernie, they're playing bingo." He says, "They're what?" He said, "Yeah, they're playing bingo, mate." He said, "You wonder why we can't win the World Cup." And that was what we were laughing at round his house, and that is where we've been while they were playing bingo.
Well, let's hope that Gareth and the boys aren't playing bingo and carpet bowls, and let's hope that they can do well in Russia this year. Finally, Al, how do you think that they will do?
There's one thing about Southgate. He's had a number of these players before when we had the young them as youngsters, so he will know a lot about them. He knows he's got a near impossible job on his hands. I hope he does all right, because I think he has more idea than most of the managers that we've had. He's been around for a while. He worked when Roy Hodgson was there, so he will know what not to do.
Yeah.
He seems to be a football man. I just hope he picks our best team. But that, having said that, who is our best team? And I, manager, I really would at this moment in time. I think, because probably going back again since the likes of Brian Robson and Gascoigne, we have no real outstanding players. Harry Kane, yes, fantastic. Dele Alli, halfway through the season, I thought this kid's going to be a great player, but they let themselves down in the Champions League for Spurs. So if they're going to fail against Juventus, then I think they're going to fail. They won't be out. It's all about doing it on the big stage.
Yep.
And there's no bigger stage, and it's all right beating who they beat the other night, and everybody else says, yeah, we look decent. Them on telly, Hoddle and them the other night, they said, oh, we looked good first half and all that. But England have much. If you looked it up, I bet England have got the best record of any nation in the world in friendlies.
Yeah, they have.
But when it comes to the real McCoy, we don't hack it. We're just not good enough.
And sadly, nothing ever changes, does it?
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't change. Yeah. It's just a whole. And you can't have a go at the players. It's not the players' fault.
Yeah.
They can only do what they do. They're not as good as they used to be. We're just not. We didn't produce. When people say England produced these players, we never produced these players. These players were born, and they come through under great management. All the old managers, all the best. People tend to forget that all the best managers were English managers. Were great football men. Your Joe Mercers, your Ron Greenwood, your Stan Cullises, your Carricks at Everton, your Waddingtons, your Cloughs. Then they were great Englishmen who knew good players.
Yep.
These are foreign. Our game's now all about foreign managers bringing foreigners into the country and ruining our game, really, and ruining it for youngsters. And no youngsters will come through. And I can remember turning around in 1970 after the World Cup and said we'll never reach another final again, and that's the way it's turned out. And I wish I'd have had it on tape, but not that it really would have mattered. But I just couldn't see it happen, because I went away on too many trips with Chelsea and see too many nations, these black nations, with good players, and knew that they were going to improve. And where England were going backward, they were going forward. And when you see World Cups of years gone by, although they haven't kept it up, seems like Cameroon,
Yep.
You get one of these nations come out, and Colombia, was it Costa Rica last time?
Yeah.
Whoever.
Yeah. Well,
These nations come out, but we just turn up, and we're always the same England. We're there. We're the robotic team there, who hope not to lose, rather than go out and try and win.
Well, let's hope we do go out and win a few games and put a smile on our faces and give us a nice month of glorious football that starts in 2 days' time.
Well, I think the thing that hurts me more than anything, and when I say hurt, I say that without being blasé. I can't feel sorry for them because it's their own fault, but English supporters, spend their hard-earned money to follow England all over the world for these big competitions. They spend a lot of money following them, and they get disappointed every time.
Yeah.
And I really feel sad for them that they could do better things with their money. They could go on a nice cruise somewhere, you know, and they're always there longer than the players. You know, you know, can you imagine going to watch England? You know, you book up for a month to go for a World Cup, and they come home after 10 days, and you're out there for 2.5 weeks. Well, what do we do for 2.5 weeks? We come to watch England, and they're all sitting on the beach in the Bahamas and everything else with their families, you know, as if they've won the competition. You know, they're celebrated losers, you know. And I really do. I feel sorry for the fans.
Same here. Right, Al, can I thank you again for your time, mate? It's been an absolute joy. Those were the days, my friend.
Oh yes, and they have ended, mate.
Cheers, Al.
Good luck, Paul.
Ta, pal.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.